Good morning on this Sunday, August 23rd, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Many Georgians were in the spotlight of the Democratic National Convention. Also, Georgia is in the spotlight for the wrong reason. The White House says Georgia tops the list when it comes to the rate of new coronavirus cases. And Georgia's two U.S. Senate races heat up. John Ossoff goes on the attack against incumbent Senator David Perdue. Also, Raphael Warnock hits the airwaves with a new ad. Theron, Phil, Janelle, and Kathy are all here joining us from their homes. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Many Georgians took center stage virtually at the Democratic National Convention, including former gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams and Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, who paid tribute to the late Congressman John Lewis.
Congressman Lewis would not be silenced, and neither can we. We cannot wait for some other time, some other place, some other heroes. We must be the heroes of our generation because we too are America. Our votes can be our voice.
As many speakers this week focused on attacking President Trump, Mayor Bottoms took a different tone and focused on the importance of voting, as she remembered Congressman John Lewis. Georgia's own Stacey Abrams, once in the running for the VP spot, also went after President Trump.
Faced with a president of cowardice, Joe Biden is a man of proven courage. He will restore our moral compass by confronting our challenges, not by hiding from them or undermining our elections to keep his job.
Theron, we're just going to come out straight to you. I want to get your take on this. All of the focus on Georgia, does this really mean Democrats are taking it seriously that Georgia is in play this year?
Well, Laura, we are living in a battleground state. Not only did we see that with the really talented list of speakers at the convention, but if people just continue to look at their television screens, they'll see the huge amount of ads that we're getting this time around in this presidential election. But just got to give a really big shout out to the convention staff, who did a fantastic job. I mean, we did not know how this virtual new norm is going to work out, but the convention looked like America, African Americans, white, Asian, Hispanic, Native Americans, a lot of brothers and sisters from the LGBTQ plus community, and a lot of our disabled brothers and sisters as well was highlighted in this convention. So it was a huge boost, not only for the Biden campaign and the Biden-Harris campaign, but it also was just a huge boost for Democrats, and hopefully we'll be able to continue this momentum. And when next week, I think we're going to see something totally different.
Phil, let me go to you, because I think if moderate Democrats or moderate Republicans in Georgia, if there are any left, I think if they watched Joe Biden's speech, I mean, it was attractive, it was uplifting, it was hopeful, and it was kind of a real difference between him and Donald Trump. Do you think Republicans should worry about, that message of like, let's get back to normal type of feeling?
I don't think Republicans or independents or swing voters really need to listen to a speech that just has a lot of nice bromides and pleasant things to say, and that may have been the old Joe Biden of 25 years ago, but Joe Biden never really talked about his party's radical platform. And I'm not just using the word to throw it out, just read it. It's got everything from open borders to high taxes. Joe Biden openly says that if he's president, he's going to raise our taxes. That's absurd when you're dealing with COVID, for example. But there were a wide array of Georgians featured at the Democratic Convention. I do agree, I think all the panelists agree that we are a swing state in November, and both the Republicans and Democrats have to push out their base. But the key targets are the independents and the moderates and these swing voters. And I will say this, I'll give a shout out to former President Jimmy Carter at age 95. Boy, he's doing great. He's far sharper than Joe Biden.
It was nice to hear from him. Sorry for some of those technical issues there. But Kathy, there was a lot of focus on President Trump. We see the polls in Georgia show a very tight race. Did you hear enough about why Democrats have better policies, or is this more just about voting against President Trump?
Well, I think the winning message right now is just vote against President Trump, because I think people can find 10 things on their personal list of disruptions that they want to get rid of. So I think that's important. I'm a policy person, so me and Elizabeth Warren could get in a room and drive everybody crazy talking about policy. But I think that Biden had an incredible speech. He knocked it out of the park. But more importantly, I think that the appeal to young people and young people of color in particular kind of follows the Abrams playbook for how to bring out incrementally more voters, not just trying to flip voters who are undecided, because there aren't many undecided voters. So you've got to go after those 750,000 people who have registered to vote recently, most of whom are young and who will make Georgia go into the column for Biden.
So Janelle, how do Georgia candidates do that? I mean, how does President Trump do that here in Georgia, to go after those newly registered voters? And, what can we expect next week? Will we see more Georgians also take the virtual stage?
So I think that President Trump, all he really has to do is continue to focus on the reality of what's happening right now. When I watched the DNC convention, I felt like it was more of a I hate Trump convention, because the Democratic leaders have no faith in Biden's ability to do the job. They just want people to rest in their hate against the president and hope that they vote against him for that very reason. I think that there was a lot of focus on the pandemic. I feel like President Trump and the RNC is going to focus a lot on that as well. I do think in next week's convention, I think that there is a notion that President Trump created the pandemic of some sort coming out of the Democratic platform. And I think all that does is sends a message that what we need is a superhero that has a good attitude. And that's the person that will take the lead and will be able to lead this country. And that's just unrealistic. There was no mention of the police officers that have been on the front line since May 26th. There was no mention of the small businesses that are starving because some of these cities refuse to open up, and yet they support protesters and violent acts. There was no mention of the children who've been killed during this time of the peaceful protesting. I think we're going to see all of that in the RNC convention. The Democrats want to focus on the fantasy of America, and I think next week the RNC and the president is going to focus on the reality of America, and I think that's what's going to win the presidency.
Phil, back to you, because, since Georgia is a battleground state, what message will really resonate with Republicans here in Georgia who are maybe on the fence about President Trump? And what Georgians would you like to see up there on stage next week?
Well, I think the message is going to resonate and is already resonating, and you can see this in some internal polling by the Trump campaign and also by the Democrats. They need to be worried about losing some independent and swing voters, particularly suburban women voters. I'm not sure if Kathy's analysis is correct. There are some undecideds out there, especially in the suburbs, and that's where the battlegrounds are. And I think when you show pictures of rioting and looting, you drive around Atlanta, for example, and see boarded up businesses and burned out businesses, and the fact that the police were pulled away from a downtown area where a little girl was killed, and I could go on and on. This has turned a lot of people who may not like Trump personally, but like his policies and particularly like law and order. And I think you'll see a lot of Georgians showcased, especially our senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, for example, and of course Brian Kemp.
Theron, last word on this, because Phil brought up a really great point. Do you focus on policies and maybe not liking the person, or do you like the person and maybe not the policies? Is this the choice that we're coming down to for president?
Maybe Phil and Janelle was watching a different convention. The convention that I watched every single day this week was a convention full of policy issues when we talked about everything from criminal justice reform. We talked about small businesses. We talked about how we want to grow the economy. We talked about health care. I mean, every single issue that matters to the American people were discussed. I mean, if you look at Joe Biden's top 4 issues, let's not forget climate change. That's something that Republicans are just terrible at talking about. And so, yes, Lord, it cannot be about beat Donald Trump and he's terrible president and he was go down in history as one of the worst presidents. It's not just going to be about that. We're going to be able to talk about a lot of issues that matter to the American people, and you're going to see that during this week of the Republican convention.
All right. Thank you all. Well, coming up, the White House says Georgia is #1 when it comes to the rate of COVID-19 cases. We'll discuss coming up.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang.
The White House Coronavirus Task Force says Georgia is still in the red zone and must do more to stop the spread of the virus. Kathy, we'll start with you this blog. I've been watching the numbers this week. We're finally seeing a drop in the number of cases, hospitalizations, and deaths, and we're all praying that that trend continues. The governor says, the critics, and he's saying that the critics are media, they're just playing pandemic politics. Your thoughts on that?
Well, the numbers don't lie. It's not pandemic politics. It's that Georgia is double the national average in the rate of new virus cases, period. And it's so much a problem that as other states that have been worse off than we have been have begun to get it under control, Georgia is at the top of the list now. And even the White House is starting to say, you're kind of raining on our parade, buddy. You better get this under control. So, the numbers are slightly better. It's not dramatically better. And with kids going back to school and the fall flu season, we may be, having a minor plateau, but at a much higher level than when we opened up. So it can only get higher if the flu season and school openings come back to haunt us.
Janelle, let's follow up on Kathy's comments. It is President Trump's own White House Coronavirus Task Force pointing out the rate of Georgia's cases and that it was higher than any other state. Those are facts. And so is it true, do you think, what Kathy said, that, hey, buddy, you're raining on our parade to Governor Kemp? Is that the message that the White House is sending out? I mean, how can those numbers that are facts, how can they be political?
Well, see, here's the way I look at it. The president, as I've said this before, the president's administration as well as the governor are all building planes in the sky. That means there will be some hits and there will be some misses. I think at the end of the day, we have to look at not just the small perspectives, but we need to look at the overall outlooks. And in the overall outlooks, there is at the end of the day, there's 26%. We're down 26% on hospitalizations. New cases, and down 19% on hospitalizations. And as far as positive cases, we're down 10%. So I think we have to just look at the overall outlook.
Phil, Governor Kemp reversed course on the mask mandate, allowing cities and counties to require masks if they want. Why do you think he did the reversal?
Well, I think that, number one, his executive order may not have held up in court. And I think he wanted to pivot somewhat. He did want to protect and is protecting private businesses with his new pivot because the order says that the mask requirement is only if an owner of a business establishment agrees to that. And there's some other caveats in there. For example, there's a lot of talk about fining people, but you're not going to be fining private businesses. You're not going to be fining residences. So I think he did have to pivot in terms of these new numbers. And I do agree with Janelle. Most of the media, not all, is not telling the other side of the story with regard to the positive cases that are going down. And yes, hospitalizations are super important. I think we've all agreed on that on the show. And they are down significantly. So there is a brighter picture, and especially the Atlanta Journal-Constitution is not telling the whole story, and I'm glad Governor Kemp called them out for it. It's been shoddy journalism this past week.
Theron, the governor dropped his fight against the city of Atlanta. Do you think with the way that the numbers were headed that he did the right thing, realizing even many Republicans are okay with wearing masks?
Well, this is a global pandemic, and so governors had to respond because there was just no leadership from the White House on how we should follow a national plan to come out of this pandemic. And so what is happening now, Lori, is that the governor understands local control. He finally, won't probably say it that explicitly, but at the end of the day, the county commissioners, the county commission chairs, the mayors, the CEOs of these counties, these school board members, they have been the one that have been on the front line since this pandemic has hit Georgia. And so now what he has done is basically acknowledge that, hey, if you want to put in a mask mandate in your city or your county, based on the numbers, then do so. Because we also have to be, call balls and strikes. There are some counties in Georgia that are not as bad as others, particularly in the metro area. And so now, again, these mayors and these local leaders are just finally getting the recognition they deserve for being on the front line since day one of this pandemic, because the failure of this White House to give us a national strategy of how do we come out of this pandemic as Americans.
One place where masks will be required that's near and dear to a lot of your hearts, the SEC football games where attendance will be limited. Kathy, you're a season ticket holder, UGA. Your thoughts on this?
Listen, the only thing that I don't like about the fall is that elections are held during football season. And if I could move something, I'd move elections to the spring. So that's how much I feel about Georgia football. We've been season ticket holders in my family for decades. I want to go to that stadium so bad, but I talked last night with my brother, and we are not going to accept the tickets. We're going to wait till next year and watch it in the privacy of our home, because trying to keep 20,000 people safe, even though the governor has sort of created an exemption for this in his executive order, violates every principle about controlling this disease. And I cannot even describe how much I love Georgia football. So this is really a sacrifice. And I'm sure Phil will have something to say about it. But I don't think having fans in the stadium is going to be something that's going to be good for Georgia, good for the fans, and good for the players.
Phil, what do you think about that?
Well, Kathy, we'll miss you, but I'm glad there's going to be in-person folks, say at Sanford Stadium, and the SEC seems to be going forward. Yes, masks will be required when you go in, but I think that there's still some kinks to be ironed out. That is true. For example, getting into and out of a stadium is going to be very interesting, and how you have to socially distance, and I think you're still going to be seeing some new rules on that. But let the games begin.
All right, well, coming up, we talk Georgia's 2 U.S. Senate races, and there's lots to talk about after the break.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
A new ad out by Democrat Jon Ossoff goes after Republican incumbent David Perdue over his COVID policy, saying when Georgians needed help, Perdue fought against stimulus checks for workers. Janelle, right to you. You are in a Senator Perdue ad. Your thoughts on this one from Jon Ossoff?
Yeah, you know what? I feel like Jon Ossoff's ads was vague enough to misinform, but was unclear enough to actually educate. So let's talk about it a little bit. So he said that Senator Perdue opposed the $1,200 stimulus check. Well, that's ridiculous. He definitely supported the CARES Act, which is where the stimulus check was under. He voted for it. And then he also mentioned Senator Perdue giving millions to corporate businesses. Well, what he's referring to is the PPP funding that not only went to corporate businesses, but went to small businesses as well. I think at the end of the day, we have to really look at the details of it. What he failed to mention is that Ossoff is opposing Senator Perdue's proposal for the School Act, which is to provide PPE to schools as well as to teachers to help local districts in education. So I think that at the end of the day, his ads are a little weak. And they're misinformed.
Theron, over to you. And we apologize again for the technical difficulties. It's just doing a show during the pandemic, and not having the gang here is really hard. So I miss you guys. But Theron, do you agree with Janelle's assessment? I mean, she's saying that the ads are weak.
No, I think the ads are great. And shout out to Jon Ossoff. I mean, he is firing back. I mean, because he understands that he's got to define himself before the Republicans define him. And so I think that him on the offense right now is the right thing for his campaign. What he's really doing, Lori, is basically like he's a person, he's a man of the people versus a Washington insider that is only kind of concerned about his donors and, in Washington politics. And so as long as he can continue to fall on the side of the working class Georgians and really sort of continue to paint Senator Perdue as a person who's only sort of worried about corporate dollars and is a Washington insider, that's really good for him. And so seeing him on the offense is something that we haven't seen from a lot of Democrats really since Stacey Abrams statewide. And so what he's got to do now, Lori, he's got to continue to raise the money, because we know that the Republicans are going to do everything they can to make sure that Senator Perdue has the funds to compete. But I'm really happy for Ossoff, and he's got to keep it up. And I think it's really good for Democrats.
Phil, we see the strategy by Democrats going after Republicans on the coronavirus response. I mean, do they have a point considering the numbers and especially the fact that we're #1 here in Georgia?
I think most Georgians and most Americans have made up their mind about COVID, and it's going to be with us for a while. And I think that all 50 states and the governors are the ones that are really driving the policies. And so I think people are, the federal government is there to help. And I think even a lot of Democrat governors have said the Trump administration has been there for them and for everybody. So I think it's a state by state issue. People are going to have to be happy or not happy with what's happening in Georgia. But it goes beyond that, especially with the Ossoff-Perdue race. I would remind Theron 2 years ago, Ossoff had one of the most expensive races in the country and was very aggressive, and he lost a suburban area. You always hear the Democrats claim that they're doing so well in suburban areas. Well, Ossoff fell flat on his face. I don't see much different here. I think David Perdue, the incumbent, has had a solid record. He's always had up to 50, 51, 52% approval ratings pretty much throughout his career. And so his re-election prospects look pretty good.
Okay, I want to just make sure we get in time because, Kathy, we saw Raphael Warnock's debut ad. He, of course, is one of several Democrats vying for Republican Kelly Loeffler's seat. He's really struggled to kind of break out from the pack. Will we see the media blitz now because he has money? Do we have Kathy? There she is.
Yeah. I think he does have to spend a little money right now. It's kind of early, normally speaking, if you were a well-defined candidate, because you'd want to kind of hold it back till the fall. But he does have to break out of the pack. I think it's a good ad. I think he will break out of the pack. I find it interesting. I think that Loeffler's financial advantage is starting to show in the race against Collins. We'll see how long that lasts, and that really does give Warnock an opportunity to sort of creep past Collins in the polls that we're seeing right now. So I think it's a good move for him. And, boy, we're going to see a lot of ads. We got 72 days from this Sunday morning until Election Day. So buckle up. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Thanks for your patience. Y'all look beautiful when you freeze on screen. So there is that. Well, coming up, we'll have winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Okay, we will start with Theron this week.
All right, my first winner is definitely going to be former Vice President Joe Biden. He's our official Democratic nominee for president, so I want to make him my first winner. Also want to make Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms a winner. She did a fantastic tribute to Congressman John Lewis. It was really good. And guys, I want to give a shout out and make a winner this week, Mark Arnold. He's with Peachtree Pest Control, the company that came to my house this week, and he's a big fan of the show. And definitely Phil and Janelle and Kathy and Lori, I couldn't get him to tell us which one of us was his favorite, but he's a big fan of the show, so I want to give him a shout out. And then lastly, the Cobb County homeowners this week received a $119 million property tax cut. And so the average resident in DeKalb County will receive about $950 property tax cut.
Well, we love hearing from viewers. Thank you. Over to Kathy.
Oh, great. I want to give a shout out. My winner is Fani Willis. She is announcing the appointment of a Restoring Integrity Transition team led by former Mayor Shirley Franklin and attorneys Bill Dupree and Susie Uckleberry. I've been asked to join, and I'm honored to do so, but that committee will be looking into new policies and procedures and also new programs for young offenders. My loser of the week is once again folks in Georgia who need health care. Another hospital has said it's going to close, this time up in Commerce. We think that there's going to be another half dozen or so that are on shaky ground because this governor won't expand Medicaid and accept $3 billion in insurance reimbursements for the cares at these hospitals.
All right, Janelle, over to you.
Okay, my winner, thank you to Commissioner Joanne Burrell with Cobb County Commissioner. She brought to my attention the initiative of Kelly Gambrell, Commissioner Kelly Gambrell, who they initiated a $4.8 million emergency fund to homeowners to assist with mortgage payments for those who got behind. And so you can go to cobbhomesaver.org to apply if you are someone that is in need. And lastly, Governor Kemp, he's my winner for the Emergency Education Relief Funding, which provides more than $80 million in federal pandemic funding to Georgia schools. And this will go towards internet connectivity, mental health support, and also HBCU relief, to name a few. So I'm super excited about that.
All right, Phil, we have about a minute.
Okay, my loser is the liberal Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I mentioned their bias earlier, but when President Trump had a great foreign policy triumph when he helped engineer the UAE and Israel Relations Pact, that never made the front page, although it did on other papers. And I'm glad Governor Kemp took a shot at them for their bias. He's my winner.
Any losers, Phil, or any winners?
You know, I got a couple, I don't know who a winner and loser is in Savannah. There's a state house race that's being decided by 20 votes. They're recounting and recounting, so I don't know who the winner and loser is going to be in that race. Every vote counts.
All right. Thank you all so much, and thanks for your patience again. I think our technical crew definitely winners for being able to kind of fly with the time here. So thank you all so much. We appreciate you watching, and we will see you again next week. Bye-bye.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.